Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sasha Forson. I'm the Assistant Director of Nebraska, and I would like to welcome you all to our webinar, A Conversation with Noni Williams. Today's recorded event is hosted by Nebraska Women in STEM, an initiative led by Nebraska Cures and Nebraska. At Nebraska Women in STEM, we are driven by a mission to reduce barriers for women in STEM and to create an environment in Nebraska where they can thrive in their chosen careers. Part of that mission is bringing conversations like this one today. Noni is a dynamic and multifaceted creative and professional, and we are so excited to hear from her today. I will now pass things off to my Nebraska Women in STEM colleague and Executive Director of Nebraska Cures, Amanda McGill Johnson, who will lead the conversation with Noni today.
Thank you, Sasha. We are so excited for this opportunity to visit with Noni Williams. If you don't know her already, she's a senior cloud data engineer, a teaching artist, an independent data consultant, a performance poet, a storyteller, a mathematician, so many things, a philosopher born and raised right here in Omaha and North Omaha. Noni has created an intentional space for self-expression in her approach to mathematics, in her poetry, which we'll hear a little bit in a moment, and through fashion and collaborations with artists in her community. Williams has been recognized as one of 10 Outstanding Young Omahans and 10 Outstanding Young Americans, which is really awesome. Noni, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for asking me to be here. I'm so excited to be here and to see some names and faces that I recognize. Thanks for sharing your afternoon with us.
Yeah, let's start by just, for the folks who don't know you, talk to us a little bit about what it is you do professionally, what your space is in STEM.
Okay. My answer to this question used to be to what do you do? It used to be too much, but I've grown.
Sorry, we're going to make sure folks are muted. There we go. Sorry about that.
No worries. So professionally, my 9 to 5, I'm a senior cloud data engineer at Blue Cross Blue Shield, where I get to work with data analytics apprentices through the Ignite program that we started in-house at Blue Cross and has now become its own 501c nonprofit. So we worked with Bellevue to develop our curriculum where we have our apprentices go through 2 12-week modules where they take classes half the time with Bellevue, and then they are at Blue Cross doing on-the-job training. They are paid throughout the process. Once they finish those 2 12-week modules, they get offered a full-time position. And I think all of them have accepted in the 2.5, almost 3 years that we have been facilitating this program. They get hired on as associate software developers, where we take work on from other teams within the IS department. So we're working on the tech debt for other teams in our department while providing like relevant hands-on training for our team. And when positions open up on other teams, we can move our apprentices, our graduated apprentices, to those teams to have that experience on another team where they're getting to actually be a data analyst and associate software developer. So it's been really cool to be a part of the beginning of that process. I was recruited to Blue Cross, and then within maybe 3 months of being recruited as a senior cloud data engineer, the Rama Kohli leading our department, he saw, I see in your resume, you have this experience with teaching and also with pilot programs. Do you want to help us do this? And I said yes, and I've been enjoying that ever since. One of my graduated apprentices just joined. Hi, Mallory. Happy to see you here. So that is what I do with my time at Blue Cross Blue Shield. I am also an independent data consultant where one of my main clients is Collective for Youth. And I've been involved with them since I was at United Way as a data analyst. So just a lot of data pipelines throughout my life. I've been with the Nebraska Writers Collective for, I think it's a decade now. I was trying to do the math, and I think this is the beginning of my 10th year, school year with the Nebraska Writers Collective as a teaching artist. My main school that I coach is Duchesne Academy. I went there for high school, and then when they needed a coach, I was like, absolutely. I saw my sister participate in this program when she was a high school student, and watching her find her voice and feel more confident speaking out and just being who she was, I was like, I want to be a part of this. So that is a large part of what I do with the Nebraska Writers Collective. I'm also, if you see me out at events like hosting the Nebraska Poet Laureate program or the poetry and music program with Opera Omaha, that is through the Nebraska Writers Collective. As a writer on loan, I sometimes get loaned out to other organizations to serve in that capacity. So those are three of the things that I do. I think that's enough.
You're right. A lot does work to describe it, right? So let's talk about, because you do so many things, let's talk about maybe your origin story a little bit, how you got interested in technology, but also art, right? And just the merging of those things.
So I come from a tech family, but also an art family. And whenever I tell people this, they often look at me like, oh, both sides of your brain. That's so interesting. But for us, it feels like it's always gone hand in hand, especially coming from a musical family. If you've studied music, you know that it gets technical pretty quickly. And so that math part, I think, has always been a strong connection for all of us. My mom studied horticulture and like weed science and plant pathology. And I remember being like 5 years old with my little field book, my 5-year-old field book, out in the backyards with my socks rolled up past my knees, doing my little, pretending that I was like a crocodile hunter, just like going through the grass looking for bugs and animals that I could catalog in my field book and then go inside and try and identify them. I was always dragging my younger brother with me just because I didn't want to like find a snake or something and like be there by myself. But exploring and science and math has always been a part of play for us, and especially in community with my siblings. So that was where I started getting into STEM, just like being born into it. And my mom, she worked for DuPont for a little bit, and she would take us to the farms and we'd be hanging out with the farm kids and running around and looking at the different animals and plants. I participated in so many science programs in the summer at UNO, the Aim for the Stars programs. I did a biology club a number of times where we had to catch a cricket, build its habitat, and then keep it alive. But this was in the summer, and my mom didn't want the cricket in the house. And so I often had oh, this is being recorded, but I'm going to say it anyway. I often had like a crispy cricket like halfway through the program, and I had to go find a new one because I forgot about the cricket outside. And okay, I could move on to another part of my experience in STEM. I love math. I've always loved math. My mom used to get common thread, my mom just trying to find things for us to do that were like out of her way, but still something that was enriching. My mom took us to the library a lot, and she would get these withdrawn textbooks from like they'd have the bookshelf at the front of the library where it's like, these books are withdrawn, they're being sold for $1, sometimes less. And I was really drawn to the textbooks for some reason, like biology and chemistry, but my favorites were the math. And so I remember being 5 years old, teaching myself algebra. And at one point I was like, my younger siblings need to know about this too. I'm 5 or 6. My siblings are like 3 and 2 years old. And I was teacher. We had a chalkboard in the kitchen, or we'd move it around to the living room to help with like working on problems at home for homework. And I would sit my siblings down and then have class where I taught them algebra, and I would write them report cards. And you'll hear later in one of my poems about that experience, and how I got in trouble a little bit with my report cards, but that's always been a part of my experiences, learning something that I find exciting and wanting to share it with other people. I feel like I'm a lot more gracious with my educating now. I'm not writing report cards that have curse words in them. So that's growth.
Interesting. I can't wait to hear some of these poems too and how it all plays out. In fact, do you want to go ahead and share some of those pieces of work?
Sure, I can. We can start with etymology of a name. This poem was written as a prompt from my co-coach, Emily Anderson. We're talking about where our name came from, and the different names that make up who we are. And you'll see some common themes in this poem and the next that for me, family and math have always been a huge part of making who I am. Excuse me for a second, I need a cough. Okay. My name was chosen from a baby book, plucked and placed aside for my older brother. When they held him and saw how the light hung in his eyes, they saw he was worth dying for and named him Kafil. My name moved to the back of their mouths, mashed between molars in time. 1 year and 5 months and 2 weeks passed until it could become unfastened and fall on my fatigued forehead like oil for a blessing. Anointed with 2 short syllables, my name a gift like it promised I would be. Noni meaning a gift of God or some greater being who could fold space and sound to make me out of the dust kicked up from solar flares and sandstorms, to make me a sundial standing in my own silhouette. When I write lines like this, I try to fasten myself to the edge of logic like a little paperclip clamping this ego to reality in an ill-conceived proof. My mom would get withdrawn college algebra textbooks from the library when I was a child. I appointed myself teacher and sat my younger siblings down to show them that solving equations was as simple as balancing blocks on a speculative seesaw. They were infants and that meant nothing to me. I wrote them ruthless report cards, grading harshly in graphite, spelling out damn carefully because I knew there was a silent N. How loud I was about being right. How tied I was to the realm of reason. It felt like a kind of magic. Adorning my crown of afro puffs with a diadem mathematician, which felt a lot like magician when I closed my eyes. Breathing in the geometry of curved spaces and exhaling at fractals. When I got to college, I found a new name. Gifted to the world by my brother, I became Kafila's twin. It was easier for him to use as a shorthand for our story of grade skipping and dorm proximity. She's basically my twin was a coruscating crescent on his face, meeting my sunless scowl on my search for self. An identity from under the shadow of family. 10 years passed and pressed into a Gordian knot, but from the web of late teens into late 20s, I can finally see how the topology of our faces overlap. And I try to evoke the spirits of Euclid and Riemann and Leibniz and Euler and Mobius to give body to this revelation. Their theories hang in the ether like ghosts as I conjure and conjecture. What a gift to spin theoretical language like thread and wrap it around our shoulders. Space and time conspired to create a universe that we could observe simultaneously. What a gift to have a brother that names himself twin, names you twin, lends his name to your soul, covers you in a blessing that you are also worth dying for. A communal anointing.
Yay, how beautiful and just unique and special. You're getting lots of hearts there in the chatter among the participants. Do you want to talk at all about the development of that piece?
I sure can. So like I said, this was written as a prompt from my co-coach. We always participate with our students when we are writing because it feels hypocritical to ask them to do something that we're also not willing to do ourselves, which is how I got into performance poetry. I would perform some pieces here or there as a child, but when I was, especially being a teenager, I was like, I'm writing this, but I don't want anybody to see it ever or to actually know that I am writing poetry. But when I was asked to coach the poetry team and preparing them to perform in front of other people, again, I felt I can't ask you to perform in front of other people if I'm not also willing to do it myself to show you that it's not that scary. So always participating in what we're asking our students to do. Also, Emily and I just like to get together every once in a while and like have these writing sessions together where we're either developing prompts for our students or just like writing together because it's fun to write with friends. And so the beginning of the poem starts with how my name was chosen from a baby book. All of my siblings' names were chosen from baby books. We have Swahili names. So Kafila means worth dying for. He's my older brother by 1.5 years. And then Noni means anointed or gift of God. My younger brother, the one that I was bringing with me into the backyard to identify garter snakes, Jelani, and my younger sister, Nara. We all have STEM backgrounds. My older brother is a senior software engineer at Kiewit. He studied computer engineering for 4 years and then switched to accounting. And his last year in undergrad, and he has an MBA and an MBIA, and it's just an incredible human. Plays the trumpet still, so that music connection is still there for him. Oh, you can't see it the way that this is cropped. My guitar is back there somewhere. My younger brother, Jelani, he just finished his PhD in computer science, is working on a postdoc, just started his postdoc program up in Ann Arbor. And my younger sister has a degree in musical theater and dance, is a certified EMT, and just started her MBA. Correct me if I'm wrong. My mom's on the call, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I got everything right. Hi, thank you for coming.
You're welcome to chime in, Nancy, if you'd like.
And so just thinking about how, because my parents thought that Kafila was going to be a girl, and that's the name that they chose if it was going to be a girl. And so once they saw him when he was born, they're like, oh, we will call him Kafila. And then my name saved for me when I came around eventually. And then I talk a lot about abstract math throughout the poem, and I love abstract math in general. The revelation for me with mathematics that made me feel like this is more than just application, I think was slowly my whole life, but then all at once in undergrad, where I was going from it was a gen ed philosophy class, and we were talking about ways to form logical arguments. And then I went to my intro to abstract algebra class across campus, different building, and we were talking about how to form logical arguments using the same terminology. We're talking about tautologies and the notations that we're using when we're talking about a true and a true, a true and a false. And I think when it fully clicked for me that once we get past the application that we start with in schools, and then get to the fun part for me, we are seeing the basis of mathematics that we use for the application, and that is a philosophy. We are forming the way that we are talking about how the universe works, how these different aspects of our perceived world interact. And that is so philosophical because people have different views about the ways that the world works, and the body of proof that they have behind it. And so that has fascinated me ever since I felt like I had the language for putting it together, and that finds its way in my poetry a lot. I also talk about fractals a lot. I talked about breathing and the geometry of curved spaces and exhaling in fractals. I find fractals a lot of fun. My favorite fractals, if you would like to know, and do some more research yourself, love a Fibonacci spiral. Can't go wrong with that. I also love the Sierpinski triangle. It is a lot of fun to doodle, and then just like seeing the pattern grow more as you're drawing it. And I feel like this was not as popular. I also feel like Sierpinski triangles aren't very popular, but I love an Apollonian gasket. I also love like just drawing when you're looking up Apollonian gaskets, if you happen to be Googling right now for some reason and look up Apollonian gaskets while I'm talking, you'll see a lot of examples with it starting with a circle. And then Apollonian gasket is characterized by like filling in, like, let's say 2 large circles that are touching the edge of the circle and then each other, and then filling in the largest circle that you can in the gap, and then continuing that process. And that's what makes it a fractal, is that you can keep getting smaller to like zooming in and filling in those gaps with more circles, the largest circle that you can. And I just think it's a lot of fun. When I worked for the Boys and Girls Club for a while, and one of the things that I did was the Imagine Science pilot program, which was a partnership between Boys and Girls Club, Girls Inc., YMCA, and 4-H, and I was the Omaha lead for the Boys and Girls Club. We were in Omaha, Dallas, and Orange County. So I was one of the Omaha leads. And one of the projects that we did and actually brought out we were going to so many festivals. We were at the Maha Music Festival. And I was like, what'd be really cool is if we have kids draw fractals on these, what was the shape? Hexagonal shapes, this like honeycomb, that because I wanted to put Velcro on the back. And so once the kids filled theirs out, we could put them together on this giant board. And so it's almost like a beehive full of these different fractals. And I still have some pieces saved from that experience because I thought it was really cool. And I think this is just another example of how I find art in math and math and art, and it's always finding ways to be combined for me.
I am absolutely loving hearing just how your mind works. And I haven't thought about fractals in a long time, so I'm going to go down a rabbit hole when we're done here and look at all of these things. Do you want to go ahead and share your other piece that you have prepared for us?
Absolutely. This is actually another poem about fractals.
Right.
This piece I wrote for Opera Omaha as a part of their Amplifying the Black Experience project. I technically did not give it a name. It's formally named Fibonacci and Me. I am notorious for renaming things a lot of times. And at one point, Andrea Joy, who was leading this project, was like, let's just give it a name. And so it's called Fibonacci and Me. It features the Fibonacci spiral. For me, it's called Fractal version 5. And also, before I start, Fibonacci sequence being characterized by starting with the numbers 0 and 1, and then adding those two consecutive numbers together. So 0 and 1, and then 1, because 0 and 1 added together is 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, and so on. So listen and see if you can hear me actually saying the numbers in the Fibonacci sequence in the poem. It's 3 a.m. and I'm creating concentric circles on my torso as the day slips off my skin. Layer lotion and shea butter like black tautology, logical necessity. And it is. Reaching for my back, I graze past my ribs, and I remember the reason I got my tattoo down my side when I was 19. I knew my family would never see it. I grew up with rules about how I could present myself to the world. No crop shirts, no shoulders, shorts and skirts down to the tip of my longest finger, no family business out of children's mouths. Finite and absolute, my family lived in the shade of a body of logic that meant mostly covered in a way that made me wonder how bodies in truth could be bad. I began to wonder if it was just mine. It's 5 p.m. and I'm walking with my mom in the neighborhood park. It's warm and I wear just enough to let my skin taste the sun. We run our hands over bare bark and notice the scars left from past storms and the rings of a tree trunk after it's been felled. She holds up a pine cone and shouts, "Fibonacci." I had sent her a video counting the scales on the pine cone, showing that they're usually in some combination of numbers from the Fibonacci sequence. I think it's significant that the Fibonacci sequence starts with 0. A conceptual void as the basis for a pattern prolific in nature. I think it's significant that the pine cone is often shaped like the tree it fell from. I bend to stretch, and I see my stretch marks lattice around my hip bones, and I remember high school track practice in the spring when we slipped off pants and traded them for Nike Tempo shorts that curved up the thigh. None of the other athletes had stretch marks like mine, the kind that come from growing too much, too soon. It's 8 p.m. and I'm sitting on the cool tiled floor in my mother's kitchen. I close my eyes and imagine folding ceramic squares like handkerchiefs, pressing them into some form not defined by Euclidean space. I realize I've only ever found peace searching for power in this place I create when my voice is flattened to less than sound wave, less than energy, less than matter, and I am made more theoretical than tangible. In this space, this mental room I constructed to explore the idea of being nothing, I would become a god. I could form my mouth around the edges of everything and swallow universes whole, sagging the corners of my lips on mountains, be burnt by suns as they became a part of me. In this vacuum devoid of warmth and matter, my body is inconsequential. Everything can be anything, so I could dream of being made into something more. I could follow the outlines of every person I've ever been along their edges, connect them on nodes to spell my name out over and over until I look like poetry, look like hope in the form of a fractal, a never-ending pattern, infinitely complex and self-similar, less fracture and more part of a whole. There is a conceptualization of fractals that implies that an infinite fractal curve fills space more efficiently than an ordinary line. I tell myself this means I can compress more of me into this existence. Concentrated essence, undiluted hope.
Yay. I could listen to you forever, by the way. Is there anything, and folks, start thinking about your questions and raise your hand if you do have one, but is there anything then you'd like to share about this piece?
So the piece, I'll share a couple things. I mentioned 3 a.m., 5 p.m., and 8 p.m. So if you got that as the reference to the fractals, great job. If not, that's okay. I wrote this piece because of math and my family and those connections. But I remember writing this and pulling out some of the fractal imagery and then sharing it with Andrea Joy, and her asking, what are you trying to say with this piece? And then I had to sit and think with that for myself. And it's actually a question that I use a lot more now when I'm writing to help focus it a bit. But really thinking about how these patterns that we have within our families are never just like whatever you're experiencing right now in this generation is rarely just right now in this generation. It's like some version of this has been passed down from what your parents experience and what they experience. And it feels a bit like a fractal of how it all builds on itself. And like looking back, it's one thing and it is the thing that you see, but then zooming in, it's still that pattern. And so just really trying to capture what it felt like to follow these I don't want to, it's not necessarily, I guess, in a sense, generational traumas or just these generational affects that get passed down. So the part where I mentioned like rules about how I could present myself to the world, I would not have been allowed to wear this when I was younger. I like if it was something with shoulders out, I had to wear a shirt underneath it. I don't think that I wore a dress without sleeves until I was in college. Like everything had to go down to the tips of my fingers, and I was like, that's not fair because I have really long arms, and so that's basically at my knees. And so feeling like for that part of it, that like bodies were bad, but then also the part where I mentioned no family business out of children's mouths, growing up in a family where you keep a lot of your business in the house close to your chest, you don't share a lot of that out. And so what does that look like with me being a poet, needing to get these things out and coming out from underneath that shadow of expectations of how I should and needed to exist in the world, and how math has been a place for me to do that because of that abstraction of self and thinking like if this idea of math, this application is actually bigger than this, if it's more than this, then I can find something more for me outside of what I know.
Cool. Any questions for Noni? I know I can always come up with some. Martha, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Noni, what a pleasure. It's so much fun to listen to your poetry and all the fun that you have with data and art. So that's wonderful. And you are very well aware of how technology has leapfrogged humans, and artificial intelligence is getting more and more sophisticated and interesting. I was wondering if you have dabbled on it, and if you have, how is that being manifested in your creative mathematical world?
I have actually. I gave a talk not too long ago. I feel like sometime in September about just like an introduction to artificial intelligence for nonprofit, for people working on nonprofit, and what it means to be a prompt engineer in that aspect. I don't use artificial intelligence in what I do and how I create, but I get a lot of questions about how it's, well, that's not entirely true. I don't use it a lot in my creative practice. I do use it at work. We have AI hackathons every once in a while at Blue Cross where the whole department, we all just pick different topics and we work on it for the day. And then it becomes, if something bubbles up, then that becomes a project that we bring forward as a department to continue working on and developing. But I feel that the part that sets us apart is that we are still humans and that artificial intelligence has not been made to the capacity of thinking about what it what it means to have that nuance of being a human. I think when we talk about artificial intelligence, there's often this hesitation of like, the robots are coming for me and what I do in my job, but it's still not you. It still doesn't have the voice that you have the capacity of bringing forward if we spend more time like getting in touch with what it means to be a human, the things that set us apart. I have this pet project that I am working on, where it's more machine learning, but it falls underneath the umbrella of artificial intelligence, where I feel like if I as a human can say this distinctively is this poet's style, then there are some aspects of the poetry that can be mathematically determined as like, this is this artist, this writer's style. And so my hypothesis is that that can be broken out, and the project ultimately that I'm working on is creating a model that has a big library full of poetry, pulling out these different characteristics that I can identify with artificial intelligence, and then also the author, developing a model that can accurately, I'm aiming for 95% confidence of predicting, like based on this introduction of this poetry and the database that I have access to and the model, I can accurately predict who this poet is. And then once that is proven, once I can show that in written form, mathematical form, I would love to bring that into a place where we can explore more of these aspects about what makes an artist style, like using technology to make poetry and the written word more engaging, and how can we explore more of the senses. So I guess to answer your question, I don't use artificial intelligence a lot in my creative practice, but I do have interest in putting together my own model to explore this project. I just need a little dedicated time to keep working on it. I go back to my notes every once in a while and keep working away at it. But hopefully that is something that I can come back to you guys at some point and be like, done, here's the link.
Cool, thank you.
Well, and someone was kind enough to drop a link to your website in the chat to find more information on that nonprofits talk. There's somebody asked in the chat if you would do it again, and there's that resource, and maybe we can connect you later. But Mallory has her hand up, so I want to get to her question.
Hi, Mallory.
Mallory, you can unmute yourself and ask your question if you'd like.
Mallory is one of the graduates from the Ignite program at Blue Cross cohort 3. Yes, you were in cohort 3. Maybe.
I don't know. Can you hear me, Mallory? Maybe she stepped away for a moment and forgot her hand was up. What is in that cohort? How many women are in there? Are you seeing more women getting into tech, or?
It is about, or it has been about, do I have the numbers? I don't want to lie. Cohort 3 was a 50-50 split. Cohort 2, we had, that was also a 50-50 split as well. Cohort 1, also 50-50 split, cool. Cohort 4, we only had one apprentice, because we were going through the cohorts pretty quickly, and I was like, okay, we need some time to like continue to develop what it looks like after they graduate. Like, what is this like full-time employed still on the job training look like? And I need a little bit more capacity. So we only took on one apprentice for cohort 4, and we're talking about cohort 5 sometime in 2025. But again, trying to give a little bit more room so that we can make sure that we are figuring out a pathway to success for everyone that participates.
Do you have any advice, for the largely women in STEM listening to this, or even for the women interested in helping, like finding their niche, kind of like you have this cross sector of art and poetry and your passions, and everybody's would look a little different, right? But just any advice out there?
I think being unapologetic about the things that you're interested in, and also so much of my experience, especially in education, when I was in the academic world, being in rooms with a lot of male voices where it felt like my voice did not matter, and learning to just speak up and say the thing anyway. That takes a lot of work though. Me saying that now, it's like, oh, just say it. It's does not feel that easy in the moment, especially as you're getting used to it. Especially if you are someone who talks a little bit softer and are used to being in these experiences where people just start talking over you. One thing that I've learned is that I just don't stop talking. If someone talks over me, I'm just gonna keep saying my sentence, and now we both look ridiculous. So you could stop talking so I can finish what I'm saying. Um, I think having people to look to as role models for those strong people in those rooms, in those spaces, like Nancy Williams, my mom, I go to her for advice all the time, whether it's a text or a phone call. And you can't all have my mom, I'm so sorry, but we have so many great role models in the community, and people who are willing to help. And I think that's also a great lesson to learn, is that there are so many people in the community, especially professional women in STEM, who are open and kind and willing to give you a word of advice. So don't be afraid to reach out. You can send messages on LinkedIn, or if you're going to these different events in person, being brave to speak up and say something. It can be nerve-wracking when you don't know anybody at first. Or you're just not as familiar with the space, but it is really worth it. So practicing those little moments of bravery where we're reaching out to new people and trying new things, but really just like being unapologetic about the things that you like. Like I like poetry. Even if I didn't start writing about math, I still would have been like, I love poetry and I'm going to talk about it when I get the opportunities, or I'm just going to participate. And I don't care that anybody else, if anybody else is doing this. I love Legos. Oh no, I just broke my little koi fish. I was trying to show you. I have a little koi fish on my desk. I have so many Legos out in my living room. And that's one of the things where I find the intersection between play and joy, and play and learning. Lego robotics has been a very impactful part of my life, from participating when I was younger, and then being a coach, and now just like watching Lego robotics videos on the internet. But finding those places where engaging in STEM feels like play. Again, even if there aren't other people that are engaging with it. I know I feel like a lot of this is me saying, don't be afraid to go do it alone, but don't be afraid to go do it alone. And also drag your friends with you, even if they're not STEM people, they like you. So they can like things that you're interested in, even if it's just for a little bit. And then finding more STEM friends. I would love more STEM friends. So if you have STEM things that interest you, you can find me on the internet. My website is in the chat now, but I'm also on Instagram and just like out in the world. So
I love this theme of like leaning into your joy, right? Because that brings us balance. It keeps us going during the tough times, and I love it. I love it. Any final questions from anyone?
I have a question, Noni. So people don't hear STEM careers and think, oh, that is so creative. Even though those of us that have familiarity of what STEM is and the types of jobs there are, we can argue that they are very creative, but they're not thought of in the way that, you know, you're a painter, an artist, or a poet. How has expressing that artist in you as a poet really helped you in a career that's not often thought of as being creative?
So for me, I have always thought as what I do as just extensions of storytelling. So poetry, I'm storytelling. With math, as a data analyst, data scientist, I am telling a story, and then I'm thinking about how can I tell the story that I want to tell? How can I get access to the data that I need to be a part of the storytelling? How can I create these pathways as a data engineer to get from one place to the other? But you can't even get to the place where you are doing that technical aspect of creating these pipelines or creating the dashboard if you haven't spent the time thinking about what is the story that I need to tell. So for me, that creativity, it's right there. It is, for me, it's a necessary part. And I think that we all have seen different deliverables where it's like, I don't feel like this person may have tapped into their creativity for this, because it's like it's flat and it's just right there. And I think that leaning into the creativity that we have within us, the things that make us unique, are a part of what brings those tech products, those deliverables, to a new place, where we are not trying to be one dimensional because that's what we're expected to be, what someone else has told us that we need to be. I've always been an ideator, like a big picture person. So like how can I pull all of these pieces together and put my Noni stamp on it in whatever way that materializes. I often find myself writing documentation because it's like, we need to get to this efficiently, but like we could say this in a way that is engaging, wordsmith it in a way that feels a bit like, again, tapping into that creativity. But really just that innovation of products. We would not have the innovative products that we have if we didn't have that creativity. Something that always gets me is, like, let's say you use a tool like Photoshop and you are creating visuals for people. But the thing that gets me is that there are developers that created this thing. Like, it's one thing to use it. For me, it feels like speaking a whole different language, just like using the user interface, because I'm not a Photoshop person. But then thinking about the technology that went into it, and that somebody had to think that first what you're doing is possible, and then how to create it so that you can do those things. Like, being a developer requires so much creativity, so much forethought, and that abstract thinking of like, how is someone else going to experience this?
I love that. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? I'm dropping a survey in the chat just about this experience here today. And if there aren't any other questions, then we'll just thank Noni for sharing her amazing experience and her poetry with us. And do you have any final thoughts?
I just want to thank everyone for showing up and being a part of the conversation. Like I said, if you want STEM friends, I also want more friends who are interested in STEM. I have converted all of my friends to math people in my mind, and so I'm looking for new people to explore that with as well. You can find my website link in the chat. You can find me on Instagram at Noni Has Knees. I've been using that since I was in kindergarten because sometimes I mumble, I speak softly, or people just don't hear my name correctly. And so I say Noni, like no knees, but I have knees, and then I point to my knees. So Noni Has Knees on Instagram.
Oh, I love it. And I love that you haven't updated it. I love it. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Just a few quick reminders about Nebraska Women in STEM. We do have a service and social with UNO's We STEM organization coming up at Access Period, December 12th. So we'd love to see you there. We just put it on the website today. Also, we still have an open call for presenters for our Women in STEM conference that open call closes at the middle of November. And so if you or any of your friends should apply, make sure to make that happen before then. Sasha, do you have any closing thoughts?
Nope, just appreciate you all for joining us today. And thank you again, Noni, very much.
I had so much fun.
Thanks. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks all.